Ella and I joined together as a Zoomer and a Boomer. We have different knowledge and different expertise, different digital acumens, but we share a real passion and urgency to fuel transformation to build a new future. We look at radical collaboration and this really creative tension between generations, boomers and zoomers, as necessary and integral to the transformation we all see. Today, our goal is to impact a common challenge facing every executive, entrepreneur, administrator, student. How are we going to reshape our fractured world?
I think that we find ourselves at a place where the world is so shattered that we need truly revolutionary change. When you are thinking quietly to yourself, when you imagine a sustainable post-COVID world, what do you imagine? How is it different from now? Is it reformed? Is it reshaped? Or is it absolutely revolutionized from where we find ourselves today? Ira Kaufman, as the author of EmPower Us, has clearly been thinking about this question very deeply. So Dr. Kaufman, I'd like to ask you, why did you write the book? What empowered you to decide that now is the time that we need to truly revolutionize our system?
Well, friends, I'm sharing with you a 4-year journey in 20 minutes. Velimir Shirker, a colleague from Zagreb in Croatia, and I met. We shared a really joint question and a struggle, how to fix this broken world. And we looked at how do we provide a roadmap to the rising voices, this next generation, the marginalized and women who are screaming for change, yearning for equality, looking to advance the common good, trying to understand how to deal with a positive climate for the future. We're going to try to give you a taste of what we discovered. And we're going to begin with 4 ingredients, which is necessary for each of us for transformation. For us, transformation begins and ends with our shared values. Let's look at the why, the who, the what, and the how of transformation. Why? Why? Why is the world broken? Well, for us, when we looked into it, our values are compromised, trumped by self-interest. Our solution, empower values as a strategy to drive transformation, which we'll discuss. Who's the target? Who are we trying to change? We have to change ourselves. So we have to replace the me, which has been our focus with self-interest, with the us. The challenge is often in looking within, and what are our silent myths? What are our hidden beliefs that we live by that fracture this humanity? Like, it's okay to lie and cheat as long as we can get away with it. Or, I need to protect my own home, let others take care of themselves. We have a list of, in the first chapter, 20 different myths, and each one of you can add your own myths. Well, these contribute to a me mentality instead of an us mentality. And what's the what? What do we have to change? What actions do we have to change? For the most part, in our commercial world, and often in our organization world, we're dealing with a solely transactional actions or approach to a decision. These actions are focused on gaining something, money, ideas, status, instead of a transformative approach, which is really focused on change and transformation, making a difference and creating the common good. So we need to replace this focus solely on transactional to a combined hybrid approach, of course having transactions, but really understanding the intention for transformation. And the how. How is building value. For us, trust is a very core value. That's why I said it begins with values and it ends with values. Trust is a value we all cherish, but the glue, which is trust, in our relationships has been decimated and often destroyed. We look at trust as a currency, which we cherish, but it has to be rebuilt. We have to gain value in our relationships and our leadership to let our organizations and our institutions thrive. So Ella, you've worked with me for almost a year now on EmPower Us. What draws you to EmPower Us? What's the unique feature?
So really, it comes from 2020, my experience in 2020. A year ago from today, in February of 2020, I was a normal high schooler. My schedule was so jam-packed between college applications and whatnot that I could barely find time to eat or sleep. And then in March 2020, coronavirus hit. And suddenly I didn't even have to go to school anymore. I had nothing to do but to sit and to reflect and to think. And the longer that I was able to do that, as I saw that the rest of the world was being rocked by so many crises, from COVID-19 to environmental crises to racial crises throughout the globe, I recognized that I was in a unique position where I had the luxury to sit back and to think about all of these things. So when Ira sent me the first couple chapters of his book from Empower Us, I recognized that I had the time to really think about these. I had the time to reflect on them, and I had the time to turn those things into action. So that's really where I come from with reading Empower Us. I had the time, I had the passion, and I needed the how. I needed some roadmap to kind of make my values and turn my passion into something tangible, into something actionable, which really came from Empower Us. If you look at this roadmap right here, this is the roadmap to strategic harmony that Empower Us brings us. It begins with our drivers, which really drive this entire process. It moves into our test values, which is what we live by, our catalytic mindset, which is driven by the drivers and the test values, which is how we think, strategic transformation, which is the actions that we take in response to our values and our mindset, and the light impacts. But really, it all comes back to the drivers. So, Ira, when you were writing this book, what do you consider to be the primary drivers for this entire process?
Well, to us, the most important thing that drives who we are were two things: power and love. We don't often take the time to contemplate or pause, like as a tradition in spiritual and religious practices, and think what really motivates us to act. Where do we derive power from? Where do we derive love from? Where does it come from? And how does it manifest? Well, in our society, power has been conceived of as aligned with control, fame, position, money, status. Love, on the other hand, has been materialized as sex, infatuation, and gaining status from it. Both of those drivers in a transformational world need to be transformed. Power must be transformed to be inclusive, to look, listen to, honor the stakeholders' interest, from the patient or the student or the consumer to the employee to the supplier to the investor and the community. These are all stakeholders. They have to equal interest in the result and the impact. And love, well, love is not only for one person, it's for the whole, for the common good, for us. We develop mutual benefit. We have to love our values and love our purpose. If we refocus on transforming power and love, we will set a new intention for transformation. And I share a really powerful quote from Martin Luther King, Dr. Martin Luther King, and he expressed the need for the balance between power and love is: power without love is reckless and abusive. Love without power is sentimental and anemic. So I'll leave you with that thought.
In this roadmap, I really see the beginning point as the test values. And the test values are an acronym for four core values that we really have to live throughout every single part of our lives, from our personal lives to our professional lives, to see this actual transformation of the self that we've been talking about. The test values are really basic. They are trust, empathy, sustainability, and transparency. And all of these values have to exist within every part of an organization or every part of a person. Living these values, being open about ourselves, being open about what we can handle, will ultimately lead to an environment that fosters that openness. We have to start taking the first steps. We have to start making ourselves trustworthy so that the world can be more trustworthy. Us ourselves, we have to start being more empathetic if we want any hope for a more empathetic world. We have to take steps to be sustainable if we want the world to be sustainable. Ultimately, these test values are a roadmap for how we want the entire world to act. But these test values, first, they have to come from us. And these test values really, when they're transitioned into a form of leadership, they have to be transitioned into every single part of the organization. So, talking about it in a professional sense, all of the test values, trust, empathy, sustainability, and transparency, they have to be in mind when you're designing an organization. They have to be in mind when you're finding people to be a part of your organization, and they have to be in mind when you're looking at the impact that you make. So, really, I see the test values as the core of everything that we'll be talking about today, because ultimately, they are the foundation that all of this rests upon. So, Ira, for you, how do you keep yourself accountable and mindful to these values? Because these values are great in theory, but how do they actually translate into a business environment?
Well, to me, that's the core question. The core question is, how do we translate and remember our values in our daily life? It has to be an exercise of pausing before we make a decision, reflecting, understanding what these values are and how they translate into a strategy, and what impact that strategy has on all of our stakeholders. If you're considering working with a client, are you going to evaluate the intention of the client, if he or she is transactional, or if he or she is focused on a transformation and trying to contribute to their community or to the whole of society? We have to look at each one of these values. If we're looking at dealing with a company and they will not be transparent about the impact that they're having of the ingredients that is incorporated in a product. Well, why are they not being transparent? What is the effect of that product, that ingredient, on the long-term sustainability of the planet and of our community? Of course, there needs to be a balance in this accountability. We're going to make mistakes. We're not going to be perfect in every time we remember and using this filter. The most important part is the intention to be conscious or mindful of how we incorporate these values into our decisions. And that, to me, brings us to the next stage in the roadmap. It's mindset. How do we really integrate these values and test ourselves in these values as we create strategies and impact? In the old school, leaders are really basing their mindset on assumptions and the way they did things before that was successful. And then for the most part, they never challenged what didn't work. And they have to really relook at their decisions and change from a set mind to one that's flexible. In this day and age, some of it call it a purposeful mind. Other people call it a growth mindset. Some people call it an entrepreneurial mindset. We choose to call it a catalytic mindset because it integrates the four values that we've talked about and creates impact. So the four values are, and I'm going to use an example of Hamdi Ukalaya, who is the founder of Chobani, to exemplify how these values are translated. The first mindset or lens is to think quantum, to think with a full mind, to challenge your beliefs, to keep your whiteboard totally open to possibilities. And when Ukalaya in 2007 came to the United States as an immigrant, he was a sheep farmer in Turkey. He spent a year looking at yogurt, which he thought was horrible. It was sweet and watery and sugary, and he had to create a new formula for a creamy, what was then called, what he called a Greek yogurt. So how did he do that? Well, he did that by looking at what the focusing on the formula and the alternative. And then he looked secondly at the second aspect of the lens called the think circular. And that's a holistic way to look at the impact of any economic decision based upon the value for all stakeholders in the near and the short term. He looked at the important things which made a difference in his yogurt, nutritionally, in terms of making it healthy, but he did not look at only being a company which was a yogurt company. In his words, he wanted to champion diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging, being an immigrant. He wanted to contribute to his local community. He wanted to make volunteer time an opportunity for his team. He wanted to donate products, which he did extensively during COVID, and he wanted to invest in support in local farmers. So that's circular or holistic thinking. The third element of this mindset is to think connectively, or an interconnected community. That's the opportunity to look at digital networks and how digital has the power to change. Chobani began with virtually no marketing budget. And Ukulai used blogs and consumer social media interactions to exemplify his attitude toward customer service and social accountability. And he uses media not only to talk to people about their brand, but yes, he emphasized values, lifestyle, and the causes that his company believed in. And the fourth lens we have to look at, understanding these lenses are not siloed, they're interactive, they need to work together, is to think intelligence, or how you use data in a purposeful way and not in an abusive way. We have to use and collect data to drive information, messaging, and good products and transformation to our clients. Chobani did this. They are a very, very active listener to consumers. Daily, they get customer insights and ask for customers' ideas on how to reinvent themselves and their packaging. Today, they're not only a yogurt producer, they produce oat milk and probiotic drinks and plant-based creamers. And now they're even inventing iced coffee. So when I look at this model, Ella, as a leader, a blossoming leader, what do you see as important in terms of transformation?
Myself and a lot of younger people, we have a lot of passion. We want to think circular. We want to think connected. We want to think intelligent. However, in the framework that we have right now, sometimes being honest is punished. Sometimes being empathetic isn't exactly what's appreciated by our school institutions or by the jobs that we work. Sometimes us living these values can actually lead to us being penalized, because the fact of the matter is that the framework and the values that guide our institutions in the status quo aren't already accepting of all of these values. So what I think we need more people like Hamid Ulukaya. And this is a quote from him directly that I think really exemplifies what we're talking about here today. Not only is it your responsibility as a business to look after your people, environment, community, and world, that if you don't have these kinds of conversations, shame on you. Companies that deeply integrate values are more profitable, faster, more innovative, and most importantly, happier. And so what we can see here as a young activist, what needs to change in leadership is we need more people coming to this conclusion. We need more people accepting the realities that the test values are an imperative to creating a sustainable world. And we need more people to be accepting of younger people when we are trying to live these values. I am of the opinion that I think that younger generations, particularly Zoomers or my generation, is making a lot of this shift organically. We don't need people to tell us that we need a more sustainable future, because we're looking outside of our windows and we're seeing the crises that are occurring every single day. We recognize the imperative for a sustainable future. But what we need to start breaking down these barriers between generations and between people that have power and don't have power, so that ultimately everybody can make a slight altercation to the framework that allows us to live these values in the most effective way possible. So when I'm looking at what really needs to change, we need people to catalyze this process. We need this process to move faster. We need more people like Hamid Ulukaya to enter the business place and essentially create these environments where these values can truly be fostered. So Dr. Kaufman, when you're looking at all of these, how do you translate this catalytic mindset into leadership? How do you catalyze this process that I'm talking about sustainable business innovation?
Well, I think that we just have to look at Hamid Ukalaya as an example as a catalyzer. He looked at the key difference was looking at everyone as a stakeholder, everyone who was included in that process. In fact, he created a really, really valuable TED Talk, if you're interested, called the Anti-CEO Playbook. And he defined that playbook is about gratitude. How many business executives think of their work is about gratitude? He said that businesses cannot be about maximizing profits to the shareholder. He said that's the dumbest idea in the world. He said business have to be about giving, about listening to your employees, about training people. In his case, 30% of his workforce are refugees, about giving back to the community, about being accountable to the community and the society for the products that you're giving forth. You have to be responsible not only in terms of your product, but in terms of the changes. He's very political, and his company is very political, in terms of standing up for what's right, gun control, against violence, and tolerance of different people and immigration. And then he went on to say, when he looked about defining his impact, he said, most people look about return on investment. He said, I look about return on kindness. That is the true wealth. That's the difference between making a profit and being truly wealthy. The result of Chobani, which we use as an example, is after 13 years in 2021, this year, he'll be launching a public stock offering. His company is valued at $8 to $10 billion. But all the money is not going to Hamdi. Hamdi gave $150,000 to all of the staff, and it's the senior staff got over $1 million of stock. So this is a living example of a catalyzer and values-based impact which drive business for transformation. They started with virtually no money. They use social media and networks to create loyalty and trust and transparency and a quick adoption of their product. So from here, this is the basis of the catalytic mindset and some of the strategies that we could implement as organizations.